Have you ever heard of a leader who, by the age of 30, had created one of the largest empires in the ancient world? A man whose name would echo through millennia, synonymous with military genius and unparalleled ambition. Today, we're diving into the incredible story of Alexander the Great and his meteoric rise to power. Our story begins not with Alexander, but with his father, King Philip II of Macedonia. In the 4th century BC, Greece was a patchwork of fiercely independent city-states, constantly at war with each other. Macedon, to the north, was considered a backwater, a kingdom of hardy farmers and horsemen, barely Greek in the eyes of the sophistications and Spartans. But Philip was a visionary. He transformed the Macedonian army, introducing the sarissa, a terrifyingly long spear that gave his phalanx an unbeatable advantage. He was a master of diplomacy and warfare, and through a combination of conquest and strategic alliances, he brought most of mainland Greece under his control. Into this world of ambition and conflict, Alexander was born in 356 BC. His mother was the fiery Epirot princess Olympias, a woman of intense passion and deep belief in mysticism. She famously claimed that Alexander was not Philip's son, but the son of Zeus himself. Whether true or not, this divine heritage story would follow Alexander throughout his life, fueling his own belief in a special destiny. Philip spared no expense on his son's education. He brought in the greatest mind of the age, the philosopher Aristotle, to be Alexander's personal tutor. For 3 years, Aristotle taught the young prince everything from politics and ethics to botany and medicine. He instilled in Alexander a love for knowledge, a curiosity about the world, and a fascination with the epic tales of Homer. Alexander reportedly slept with a copy of the Iliad under his pillow, dreaming of emulating its hero, Achilles. But Alexander wasn't just a scholar. He was a natural-born warrior. One famous story tells of how, as a young boy, he tamed a wild and magnificent stallion named Bucephalus, a horse that no one else could ride. He did it not through force, but through understanding and patience, noticing the horse was afraid of its own shadow. This tale showed his remarkable insight and courage, even at a young age. Bucephalus would become his faithful companion, carrying him across battlefields from Greece to India. Alexander's military training began early. By 16, he was ruling Macedon as regent, while his father was away on campaign. At 18, he commanded the cavalry at the decisive Battle of Chaeronea, where Philip solidified his control over Greece. Alexander led a daring charge that shattered the elite Theban sacred band, proving his tactical brilliance and personal bravery on the battlefield. It was clear to everyone, this was no ordinary prince. However, the relationship between father and son was complex and often fraught with tension. Philip's multiple marriages and the constant court intrigue created a volatile environment. The breaking point came during a banquet for Philip's newest wife. Her uncle insulted Alexander and his mother, questioning Alexander's legitimacy as heir. An enraged Alexander threw his cup, and Philip, drunk, drew his sword and lunged at his son, only to stumble and fall. "Look, men," Alexander sneered. "Here is the man who is preparing to cross from Europe to Asia, and he cannot even cross from one couch to another." He and his mother fled into exile. Though they eventually reconciled, the trust between them was shattered. Then, in 336 BC, the unthinkable happened. During his daughter's wedding celebration, King Philip II was assassinated by one of his own bodyguards. The motives are still debated by historians. Was it a personal grudge, a political conspiracy, or did Olympias, and perhaps even Alexander, have a hand in it? We may never know for sure. At just 20 years old, Alexander was proclaimed King of Macedon, but his throne was far from secure. With Philip dead, the conquered Greek states saw an opportunity to rebel. Thebes, a powerful city-state, rose in open revolt, believing the young king was weak. They were about to learn a terrible lesson. Alexander moved with astonishing speed. He marched his army south faster than anyone thought possible. When the Thebans refused to surrender, he laid siege to the city. The assault was swift and brutal. The city was razed to the ground, its territory divided among other Greek cities, and its entire population, some 30,000 people, were sold into slavery. Only the house of the poet Pindar was spared, a nod to Alexander's respect for culture amidst the carnage. The message was clear and terrifying. defiance would be met with total destruction. All of Greece was cowed into submission. With his Greek flank secured, Alexander turned his eyes to the east. He was now ready to undertake the grand project his father had envisioned, the invasion of the mighty Persian Empire. This wasn't just about revenge for the Persian invasions of Greece a century and a half earlier. It was about glory, conquest, and the fulfillment of destiny. The Persian Empire was the largest and wealthiest empire the world had ever seen, stretching from Egypt to the Indus Valley. To challenge it was an act of audacious ambition. In the spring of 334 BC, Alexander crossed the Hellespont into Asia with an army of about 48,000 men. It was a relatively small force to take on a superpower, but it was a professional, battle-hardened army, loyal to its young and charismatic king. His first major test came at the Granicus River. The local Persian governors had gathered an army to stop him right at the border. Ignoring the advice of his older, more cautious generals, Alexander ordered an immediate, head-on assault across the river. He personally led the charge of his companion cavalry, plunging into the heart of the enemy lines. He fought like a man possessed, his plumed helmet making him an easy target. He was nearly killed, but was saved at the last second by one of his generals, Cletus the Black. The Persian line broke, and the battle turned into a rout. The first victory was his. This victory opened the doors to Asia Minor, modern-day Turkey. City after city surrendered to him. Alexander presented himself not as a conqueror, but as a liberator, freeing the Greek cities of the coast from Persian rule. He was a master of propaganda, but his strategic brilliance was on full display at the siege of Halicarnassus, where he overcame formidable defenses using sophisticated siege engines. His next legendary moment came at Gordium. There, in the ancient city, was a chariot tied to a pole with an intricate knot. An oracle had prophesied that whoever could untie the Gordian knot would rule all of Asia. After struggling with it for a moment, Alexander declared, "It makes no difference how they are loosed," and with a single stroke of his sword, he sliced the knot in two. Whether he fulfilled the prophecy or simply bypassed it, the message was powerful. Alexander did not play by the old rules. He made his own. The Persian king, Darius III, finally took the threat seriously and assembled a massive imperial army to crush the young Macedonian invader. The two forces met in 333 BC at the Battle of Issos. Despite being heavily outnumbered, Alexander used the narrow terrain to his advantage, preventing the Persians from fully deploying their vast numbers. Once again, he led a decisive cavalry, charged directly at Darius. Terrified, the great king of Persia fled the battlefield, leaving behind his army, his camp, and even his own family, his mother, wife, and children. Alexander treated the royal family with the utmost respect and courtesy, a chivalrous act that further enhanced his reputation. The path to the heart of the Persian Empire was now open. Alexander marched south along the Mediterranean coast, securing the naval bases of the Persian fleet. Most cities surrendered, but one held out: the island fortress of Tyre. The Tyrians believed their island stronghold was impregnable. Alexander responded with one of the most incredible engineering feats of the ancient world. For 7 months, his army built a massive causeway, a land bridge through the sea to the island, all while under constant attack. Once the walls were breached, his vengeance was as terrible as it was at Thebes. After Tyre, he moved into Egypt. The Egyptians, who had long resented Persian rule, welcomed him as a liberator. The Persian governor surrendered without a fight. Here, the priests declared him a pharaoh and, more importantly, the son of the god Ammon, the Egyptian equivalent of Zeus. This solidified his divine status in his own mind and in the minds of his followers. On the Mediterranean coast, he founded the first and most famous of the many cities that would bear his name, Alexandria. It was destined to become a great center of learning and culture for centuries. With Egypt secure, Alexander turned inland, seeking the final confrontation with Darius in 331 BC on the plains of Gaugamela, near modern-day Mosul in Iraq. The two armies met for the last time. Darius had gathered an immense force, including scythed chariots and war elephants, determined to overwhelm the Macedonians with sheer numbers. But Alexander was a tactical artist. He executed a brilliant and complex battle plan, drawing the Persian cavalry out to the flanks, creating a gap in their center. And just like Odysseus, he led a thunderous charge straight for Darius. And just like Odysseus, Darius fled. The Persian army collapsed, and the battle became one of the most decisive victories in history. After Gaugamela, the great cities of the Persian Empire lay open. Alexander marched into Babylon, then Susa, and finally to the ceremonial capital, Persepolis. He seized an unimaginable amount of treasure, enough to fund his campaigns for years to come. Then, in a controversial act, he burned the grand palace of Persepolis to the ground. Was it an act of revenge for the burning of Athens a century before? A drunken mistake? Or a calculated political statement that the Persian Empire was well and truly over? Historians still debate the reason, but the symbolic destruction marked the end of an era. The rise of Alexander the Great was complete. In just 4 years, a 25-year-old king from the fringes of the Greek world had defeated a superpower and conquered the largest empire on earth. But his journey was far from over. His ambition would soon lead him even further, to the edge of the known world, into lands no Greek had ever seen. His rise was a whirlwind of genius, ambition, and ruthless force that reshaped the world forever. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this journey into the ancient world, make sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next episode, where we'll follow Alexander's campaign into the unknown lands of Central Asia and India. See you next time.